Now, News Central now continues. In the Rainbow Nation, we are voting stations across South Africa will be open this weekend, as thousands of prospective voters are expected to register to vote ahead of 2024's general elections. The Election Commission, IEC, says 23,296 polling stations will welcome eligible citizens during the exercise. Registration stations are set to operate between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday. Meanwhile, the Home Affairs Department has expressed readiness to assist eligible voters who may need to collect identity documents over the weekend at 321 of its offices. And of course, ANC President Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa is today leading the ANC's voter registration campaign in Greater Joburg region, Mediolands in Soweto. And also in the same vein, leader of the opposition Economic Freedom Fighters, Julius Malema, alongside other EFF members, will also be out today, encouraging the youths to register for elections.
Want the youth to stand up, go and register to vote. When someone comes to you and says to you, why are you drinking alcohol on a day of registration, you must say, I'm refreshing. This is my refreshment after registering to vote. So it's registering to vote first, the rest shall follow. Even boyfriends, girlfriends, we don't see before we see the station. We see the station and the rest follows after. So I'm saying to the youth, please don't be irresponsible. Take responsibility. The future is in your hands. So we are really saying to the youth, today and tomorrow is your day. If you are lazy, it's too hot, open your phone, go online. www.elections.org.za. It's an IEC online registration, and therefore just go to the website of the IEC. You have no excuse to say no, it's too far and long queues. Now there is a solution. Please, the youth of South Africa will make an appeal. Let's go.
To discuss this, we are joined by Hermann Pretorius, Director for Communications for the South African Institute of Race Relations. Thank you so much for your time, Hermann.
A pleasure to be with you.
Now, let's talk about the significance of the voter registration turnout expected in South Africa ahead of the 2024 general elections, and what factors may influence the number of prospective voters registering during this particular exercise.
We look at the state of politics in South Africa, and the 2024 elections will be the first time really that there is a chance of a change of government since the advent of democracy in 1994. The ANC has been facing some political trouble, amongst other things, for a struggling economy, high unemployment numbers, and of course, load shedding, electricity interruptions, and the like. And the consequences of that has led to some damage to the ANC standing in the opinion polls. So what will drive South Africans to the ballot box next year or not? Well, firstly, whether they are registered or not. The opposition parties, especially the leading opposition party, the Democratic Alliance, have emphasized that it is a question of registering to vote, not just voting. We look at opinion polls across the country and we see the ANC below 50% for the first time going into a national and provincial election cycle. And we look at prominent provinces like Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal, where an alliance or a coalition of opposition parties like the DA and the IFP are really putting up a fight to challenge the ANC for control of those provinces. And this weekend is about those parties trying to stack the odds in their favor, because we know an election is often won not just on election day, but before, whether the parties can get their people to register to vote.
Now, could you elaborate more on the measures the Electoral Commission, has actually taken or is taking to ensure a smooth and accessible registration process, particularly for eligible citizens across the over 23,000 polling stations during this weekend's exercise?
So the IEC has long been aware that 2024, of course, will be an election year, knowing that these are the fixed 5-year terms of the national and provincial legislatures. So the IEC has been preparing for opening these 23,296 voting stations across the country. They have started training for volunteers, and this weekend's voter registration push is so far from what I can gather from people on the ground going well. It shows that the IEC is gearing up, or at least ready to gear up for the vast number of votes that they must tabulate. So it's been about promoting the registration weekend to people so that they know they can vote. If you drive down the streets here in South Africa, if you're on, listen to the radio, the IEC is on there telling people to register to vote, and the political party. So that outreach, I think, has been going quite well. Then the IEC has started the training of volunteers that will man the 23,000 plus voting stations. But then the IEC is also keeping an eye on the changes in legislation that might, between now and election day next year, affect exactly how the election will work. Next year's elections will be a unique one for South Africa. It'll be the first time that independent candidates, people who are not members of political parties, can stand to be voted into parliament. That needed a change of the law, and that law has been changed, but some of the implications are still to be ironed out in the courts, and the IEC has been quite involved in that as well.
All right, now, in what ways would you say the Home Affairs Department, is prepared to efficiently assist eligible voters in collecting identity documents from its over 300 offices, particularly this weekend? And are there any special provisions or considerations made for this purpose?
The government, the Department of Home Affairs, has indicated that extra resources will be made available to that. And if we look over the 30 years of democratic elections in South Africa, we can say with some surety that documentation of the kind of a passport or an ID document or a driver's license, this has never been, at least in the last 20 years, a big issue, showing that whatever other faults the Home Affairs Department has, and there's a lot of them, I can tell you people complain about the bureaucracy there, but at least we know that there has never been a big question mark over South African elections because citizens might not have gotten an ID or a passport ready in time for registering to vote. So seeing Home Affairs and seeing the IEC collaborate to make this registration weekend a success, and it seems to be going well, is a positive indication from the government side to make sure that democracy here functions well.
All right, I'm going to ask you two questions rolled into one. First being, what challenges, if any, might arise during this voter registration weekend? And how might they impact the overall process and subsequent participation in the upcoming elections? And of course, follow-up is, are there specific outreach or educational initiatives put in place to encourage and also facilitate voter registration, particularly targeting underrepresented or marginalized communities, now to ensure broad participation in the electoral process?
Yes, so what questions or what obstacles might they be encountered? So the question that we really look at is infrastructure. Is it possible for the people who want to register to get to the place they need to register? Now, that can happen physically by going to these specific voting stations and registering in person. So far, it seems to be going well. But as Julius Malema said in your reel that you played before we started talking, the online registration option is also there. Now, South Africa faces a quite respectable cut through of smartphone usage. So we know that even in the poorer communities in South Africa, smartphone usage is quite high. So the IEC's insurance of that vehicle of online voter support is a big part of making sure that the politics and the voter registration push doesn't just happen in the cities or in the suburban areas. And we see President Ramaphosa and the leader of the opposition, John Steenhuisen, today deliberately targeting voters who are not your typical middle-of-the-road, middle-class suburban voters, but going beyond that to ensure that the participation in the election is broad. Now, infrastructure is a problem, especially for older voters, but I do see that the political parties have rolled out volunteers to ensure that they can use taxis or use personal vehicles from other party members to get to those registration points. On the WhatsApp groups of the various parties, I see the requests for assistance coming throughout the registration day today, and it seems to be going smoothly. In terms of getting the youth out there, Mr. Malema is up for, I think, a brave task. South African youth voters are not always too reliable.
All right, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.